people are struggling to find out what they want. And on the other side, people are struggling to believe themselves about what they're doing. And I think both things are very important. I think a very important thing which I have learned, and I think which I kind of feel proud about myself, is I don't be scared of knocking on doors. I don't feel scared of talking to people. I don't feel not talking to people. I would say I would rather say asking questions. There was one thing which I always felt I kind of misread, or I would say I did not pay attention to, was my connection with people. Because the one thing which was common in all these stages was my adaptation towards cultures, my adaptation towards people.
What you just heard is a glimpse of a conversation about reinvention with Sugandha Wadhwa, not the Instagram version, the real one. In this episode, we pull back the curtain on the messy, exhausting, and ultimately beautiful reality of reinventing your identity, not just across industries, but continents. We're talking about what happens when your hard-earned professional confidence erodes in a market that can't quite see you, how to stop treating your transitions as a liability, and the shift it takes to uncover the hidden strengths you may be taking for granted because they come so naturally to you. This is Unfiltered Solopreneur. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm your host, Nikhil. My next guest is a former dentist, corporate marketer, and founder who has spent the last 15 years packing up her life across 3 continents, unlearning who she is supposed to be, and learning how to trust the self that transitions reveal. Sugandha, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you for having me here. I'm honored.
Yeah, I'm excited for our conversation. There have been lots of twists and turns in your journey. Now, you trained as a dentist, and then one day you looked around the clinic and said, this isn't me, and pivoted to an MBA in marketing, right? Now, that's a pretty seismic shift, especially in an Indian household. So was the realization a slow burn, or did something specific happen that made you say, I can't keep living this version of success that doesn't feel like mine?
Well, as you said, it was pretty, I would say, a very sudden shift, but well thought of, I would say. So it started that, healthcare, biology, human systems were all very a talk of my home, because my mom, she's a retired zoology teacher. So she used to teach in a big college with all the medical students and everything, and the healthcare and the medical system was a big talk of the home all the time. Being 2 daughters and always in Indian household, being that, okay, you either become a doctor or you become an engineer, was always the 2 ways you're bound to go. And so my sister, she chose the engineer turn, and she went to become an architect. And now comes my turn. And my mom was like, okay, you should become a doctor. And I was like, yeah, fine. I am interested in biology. I will become a doctor. And fine, there I am. I started for my medical. I got admission into BDS. I did my BDS. That was a nice time, quite a learning schedule. Everything was going pretty fine. I did my internship, and during the internship, while I was, sitting there and working on patients, and I realized that, well, this is something is stepping off for me as a person. And I realized that this is not what I am, saying that I'm proud to do it. No offense to dentists. It's the most important thing in the times these days. But I think it was not me as a person. And I thought, okay, let me just think about something else. And the thinking went for almost like 6 months or so, and it's not about what I don't want to do. It was also a question about what I want to do. And there came the point where I said, okay, how about healthcare, which is like, how do people know which doctor to go to, or how to choose the right doctor? And it's not about just a dentist, it's about a hospital also. Why do people go to a particular hospital? Or in that matter, why do this medicine sell more than the other medicine? Or why does this device, a toothbrush, sells more than the other toothbrush? These all are very fascinating facts for me. But I wanted to understand what goes behind that whole point? What's the story behind it? And then I kind of got interested into how the logos were made. What is the story behind designing a particular logo? And then came a point where I said, okay, let me just dive into doing an MBA. And came a point that, okay, why don't I do a hospital administration? But hospital administration, again, were very niche for me. And I said, no, that is not something which I want to get into. I want to do a proper MBA. And I decided to do an MBA. And the difficult part was to convince my parents about it, because obviously it's not an easy turn when your mother says, I dreamt that you would become a doctor one day. And suddenly you say, no, ma, I'm sorry, but I want to do an MBA. And it was quite a tough call. And I would say that if I remember correctly, I was the first girl in North India to have taken such a decision. And I got so many calls from families, from parents, from BDS students that how did you do this? Why did you do this? How did you do this? How did you prepare? Many people were with me, many people were against me. I remember my principal of my college saying, you wasted your degree. And I felt so bad and hurt at that time. I was like, really, did I waste my BDS? But that was something which was hurtful. I would say I would be very honest in saying that it was hurtful. But then, okay, I did my MBA again. Said it might be easy. You are doing an MBA, you come out, you get a nice corporate job, high money, everything perfect. And then it happened that the recession came in 2008, the Great Recession. And I always wanted to stick with the healthcare as I had decided, because, my main thing was not why uh, a telephone company chooses this plan over that plan, or how does a financial institution, choose between those. My plan was, it's all about healthcare communication. My part was, how to get people more be aware of healthcare.
Yeah.
Where does prevention plays a part in marketing as compared to just visiting the hospital? Why not people are more aware about prevention rather than just getting treated for diseases? So then I was like, okay, I want to stick to a healthcare industry only. And yes, because of the recession, it was very, very difficult to get the right company, to get the right profile. And finally, after a couple of months of struggles and everything, and I finally got my break into Biocon as a brand executive. That was the starting of my career. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, and power to you for that, making that shift, because you're right. I mean, there is this notion, and maybe it's changed now, at least for our generation,
Yeah.
that there were practical professions. And I think we joked about it on the pre-call too, that one
Absolutely.
of my favorite comedians, Basim Youssef, right? He said Egyptian, but similar sort of
Yeah.
ethos, where his mother told him, you're either a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, a failure, right? And in many ways, Indian culture also has this sort of notion, right? Unless you're from a business family, then it's just assumed you'll take over the business. But the
Yes.
paths are almost determined pre-birth, right? Or they used
Absolutely.
to be, I should say. But
Yeah. Definitely.
yeah, and it's awesome that you did, because so many people don't, right? And then you
Hmm.
say stay trapped in doing something that was
Hmm.
not your dream, that was not your desire. And I think honestly that we see that a lot of times in the corporate world too. I hear,
Hmm.
even if when you've chosen the profession, at some point it ends up not being the path you want to be on anymore, and things change too, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I love sort of the leap to solopreneurship. So I want to move forward now to Hamburg. Now you
Hmm.
arrive in this country where you don't speak the language. You
Hmm.
have this genuinely impressive CV that you talked about just now in consulting with
Hmm.
startups, and you built a business in another country. But
Yes.
suddenly you feel invisible in this job market, right? And then you
Hmm.
mentioned to me that 2 weeks into a UX course, you found yourself crying. So,
Yes.
what did that feel like on the inside when you'd built this whole career and suddenly it felt like none of it counted?
Uh, well, Nikhil, it was quite difficult. To give you a little background, I was pretty happy in Biocon, and then I got married. Perfect, perfect shift to my hometown, but yes, into the healthcare. I started working with Apollo hospitals at that time. Again, a very good opportunity. I had an amazing tenure over there. And then so my husband, he is from a shipping industry. He works with Hapag-Lloyd, the logistics company. And we had to move. We had to move a lot. I would not say that it affected, maybe at that time I would say it affected me for sure. And then we moved a lot. But so after I, couple of years in India doing work with big pharmaceutical companies like Biocon, big hospitals like Apollo, two healthcare startups in India where I was pretty much the first employee and kind of helped the company to start, to begin. And touch wood, they're doing pretty good now. And but very proud till date that I was a part of those companies. Then comes Dubai. In Dubai, I worked for the very big healthcare brand called VPS Healthcare. I was the marketing manager for their orthopedic hospital. Very good tenure, very amazing, fine. Again, shifted to Australia 3 years ago, 3 years after Dubai. And there it was a very difficult time because I would say in the beginning, because we shifted during the peak COVID time, and the whole, it was a very difficult time to integrate because you were put into quarantine for 15 days with locked hotel rooms and everything, and with a small son I had to take care. And then and plus a lot of stuff going on a professional side because I don't know what to do at that time.
Yeah.
But something inside of me said that I am exhausted. I am tired of proving myself. It was, people say it's finding a job is a job in itself. It's the right truth because it was
Yeah.
exhausting. So I kind of took a brave decision that I don't want to work anymore. I took a decision that no, I mean I don't want to prove myself again and again after, being at such a good position in India and Dubai. And again over here I have to kind of uh people, to kind of impress people and to kind of tell them that okay, I have a proven track record, I have an experience. Because believe me, every country's culture is different. And this I
Yeah.
learned when I landed in across these countries. And that made me go deeper into the Hofstede's cultural comparison tool, which says that every country, if you take 5 parameters, every country stands way different. And me being all across these countries made me realize that I will not be accepted so easily. So I said, I'm not going to work over here. Let me do something. But again, sitting alone at home, not doing anything was not something for me. So I have a passion for Indian traditions, Indian jewelry, and everything. I said, okay, let me start my own small business with the designing of jewelry and with a bit of manufacturing in India. I was like, okay, let me start something. But I had a very clear, how do you say, being a marketer myself, I had a very clear target audience, I had a very clear positioning in my mind, I had a very clear USP in my mind, and it worked perfectly. 3 years down the lane, I was pretty much at break even, I was doing pretty well, and then decided to pack our bags and come to Hamburg. 2023 June, almost 3 years back, we land in Hamburg. When I got to know that we are shifting, being proactive as I am, I started learning German. I started learning when I had not even landed in Germany at that time. I started learning and I was like, okay, let me see. The market is good, or, how is the market? I will have some support from people out there. No, maybe 2 or 3 families I know out here. It'll be okay. When I came out here, I think I was not that ready for a shock. But when I came out here, things were pretty difficult, pretty difficult in the terms. And when I say difficult, I mean, again, as I said, culturally, we were South Pole and North Pole, Indians and Germans in that matter, because we are people who are not so straightforward, not so direct. We are who loves, kind of being around people, social, connected, and here, people are very direct, very honest, very difficult to make friends with. So, and plus the language. Yes, the language was a big issue. So, I think I was drowning. I was drowning, I would say. I was exhausted, I would say. Couple of more adjectives you can add onto that, but things were not looking good. And uh, the only, I would say, benefit, not a benefit, the positive side, if I would say, to look at it, is that my son was getting settled. He was 6 years old when we shifted over here, and I mean, he was like, it was like we as parents just asked him that, okay, son, go to school. This is your school. Manage on your own. We can't do anything. That was pretty much what we did with him. And touch wood, I would say, he said he must have thought that my parents are not going to help me. And if I don't help myself, I can't make any friends. And he learned
Yeah.
German in pretty much, I would say, 2 months. He
Wow.
started speaking German in his school, and his teachers were like shocked to see, wow, touch wood, he was speaking pretty well. And he was settled. And today, if you ask him what's the best place out of India, Dubai, Australia, Hamburg, he would say Hamburg. So, but it was not that for me. For me,
Yeah.
it was, and my husband, he was within Hapag-Lloyd. He has been working for 11 years. So for him, people were known. The culture of the company was known. The working style was known. Yes, the the team was a bit different because of German people, but overall, the culture of the company was known.
Yeah.
To me, it was a shock. It was not that simple. It was not that easy. And yeah, I mean, Hamburg, and I think in fact, one of the papers in Germany called Die Zeit, which means the time, they sent a journalist at our house to interview me and my husband and my son about the immigrations for skilled migrants and how difficult it is and what do we see. So we had an extensive interview with them, and there was a complete coverage of us in the newspaper saying the same thing, that yes, it is a difficult country to integrate. It's a difficult country to create your own space in this market. And then ca- coming to 2024, I was still doing my German classes, not getting a job, struggling with everything. And finally, somebody, collecting information from here and there, and somebody said, UX UI designers are a lot of demand in the market because
Yeah.
language is required. And okay, I said, let me just go through it, let me do a little bit of research about it. And I went through the UX UI design course. I understood what this course is all about. Yes, I am interested in designing. Okay, so I like, okay, maybe I should do this course. Did a bit of a research, enrolled into it finally after a lot of convincing and everything, that no language will be required, I might get a job early. And as I said, 2 weeks into the course, and I was crying. I was
Yeah.
literally crying that what am I doing? This is not something for me. This is not me, because this is technical. This is more like, like I can't do technical. That is not my background. Yes, I'm a creative person, but creativity not in the borders of being technical. This is a framework creativity, and I'm not a framework creative person. I'm a person who wants to think loud. I'm a person who wants to think outside the borders. I'm a person who has all this years of experience of getting exposed to different cultures, getting exposed to different marketing styles. Because Nikhil, I think one of the most important evolution which happened in front of me was how we shifted from a conventional marketing to a digital marketing times. I had worked with print media. I used to, design for magazines. I used to design for newspapers. I used to do radio campaigns. I used to do events. And certainly everything was kind of shifted. And I was looking at, I learned about digital marketing. I learned about meta ads. I learned about paid promotions. I learned about all that. That was an evolution which was in front of me, but that evolution did not constrict me, did not limit me. But these kind of techniques were limiting me. And that's why I I saw myself as a failure when I said,
Yeah.
I can't do this. I can't do this. And I told my husband, I'm sorry, but I don't think I can do this course. And I opted out.
Yeah. Right. And it's interesting because there's this notion that as you sort of build your career, you build this book of experience and breadth and depth, that your confidence always stays at a certain level, right? And that's just not true because it can be beaten out of you, right? I mean, I had a similar experience when I tried to go back into the job market after COVID. And 80, 100 resumes I sent out, I got one interview, and it really erodes your confidence, right? You start to doubt yourself. You don't understand necessarily that that just sometimes it's a wrong fit. And also it's really hard to sort of, I almost feel like, the UX course, like you said, because at that point when your confidence is low, it's almost like the tide sort of pushes you in a direction, right? And you don't have the strength of the confidence to start swimming against it, or
Yeah.
swimming with it, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was like, when we say life happens, we say Murphy's laws happens when one thing, when you're getting late to reach
Yeah.
somewhere, you'll find all the lights turned red because everything is going against you. And at that time, something like that happened with me because everything was going against me. Not getting a job, difficult to integrate, don't have anybody close here, complete loneliness, family pretty far away, not exactly many friends out here, and on the top of it, this course which I was bound to take, and I am a failure now, and the money is wasted. So it was like one by one, the lights were turning red
Dominoes. Yeah.
completely. It was like dominoes falling apart, and I was like, what do I do? What do I do? And then as you said, you send out hundreds of resumes, and you don't get a call, and then you ask them what's the feedback. First of all, they don't give you feedback over here.
Yeah.
And if they give you feedback, the only feedback I always used to hear was, oh, your profile is impressive, but we need language. Oh, your profile is impressive, but we need language. Fair enough. I said, okay, fine. Marketing people, yes, they would require the language. I understand. But then I started applying only for English speaking roles. But there also, it was always no, because though English speaking is there, but sometimes something or the other, they always felt that no, for a marketing person, you need a kind of a profile who has a experience in German industry, who has a
Yeah.
German language. And I used to ask them, if you don't give me a job, how would I get an experience? And then you want people with experience. Isn't it like an ironical situation what's happening over here? So that happened, and it was like, as you said, the confidence, the worth, the doubts, everything comes up, and the confidence is completely down the drain. I remember sitting in one of the Indian week events in the Indian embassy, Indian consulate over here, and there was this person on the stage. He is the director for communications in Hapagloid, and he knew about my story, and but he did not know that I was sitting in the audience, and he was telling me my story on the stage. And he was saying that, I know of this girl, she's a dentist and she's a marketing person, and she is not able to find a job because she doesn't know language. But we, as I know that people are trying to learn German, but we also have to open a little bit ourselves to accept these people who are learning the language still. And I'm sitting in the audience, and he doesn't know that I'm sitting in the audience. Once the event was over, I walked up to him and I said, hi. And he's like, oh, you were here. I was telling your story. I said, I know, I heard that. He's like, did I miss anything? I said, you didn't miss, but I think you were right when you said that, we are trying our best to learn the language. But there is a bit of I would say, a kind of a handshake which is needed from your side, also from the people around here. And that's what, as I said, it made me more closer to understanding the cultures. It was made me more, I wanted to understand why there is so much of a difference and everything.
Yeah.
And it was difficult. And then came a point in 2024 when I actually got a job. I actually got a job for 3 months in a German company, and I would rather refrain myself from telling their name and everything, but it was a difficult job again because of the toxic culture, and I pulled out of it. I started having anxiety attacks, and I was like, okay, this is not for me, and I
So
kind of pulled out of it.
right. So I want to talk a little bit about the shift that happened then, right
Mhm.
after that.
Yeah.
Now you spent all this time saying I need to find a job,
Hmm.
and it was like find me a job, and then you shifted to find me, right?
Yeah.
And the thing, it's almost like the thing you'd been treating as a liability, this
Yeah.
moving every 3 or 4 years,
Hmm.
always having to rebuild. You suddenly realized this was your superpower.
Yes.
So walk me through that shift. What did it take to shed who you thought you had to be in this market, as you were describing, and
Mhm.
finally choose this new path?
So, as I said, I was going through all this, and
Yeah.
finally, I kind of, you know, a thing came into my mind when I said to myself, okay, this market is not ready to accept me. It's like I am hammering a wall where I know that there is no space for me. And I'm just, putting hammer into it and hammering it and, trying to break it. But I know that the wall cannot break. So I said, if this market is not creating a space for me, why don't I create a space in a different market? Uh, Because if I realize I am the same person, me as a person has not changed. Yes, this market is not ready to accept me. But what about me as a person? I believe I have grown. I believe I have added some more things to my hat in terms of more feathers to my hat because I see a girl who is more matured. I see a girl who is more culturally diverse. I see a girl who is, I would say, more wise. But the only thing that girl doesn't know till now is what she's good at. She might have known it. She knew it in the past when the circumstances and situations were in her favor. But now, since the girl has grown more mature, since the girl has grown more wiser, she still has to answer certain very vital questions as to what is she good at. And I had no answers at that time. Again, I think that was a point when I felt or the importance of self reflection in my life. At that point in time, I said, maybe this is the moment I I needed in my life, and I kind of thanked God that maybe God or whatever the situations were to kind of give me a moment where I could self reflect, and I did. I started talking to myself. I started asking, I started writing these questions to myself that what am I good at? And what are my strengths? If I want to close my eyes today and to see myself after 5 years, 2 years, what am I seeing? And the answers were very blurry at that time. But when I kind of, asked myself, what are the things which I have been good at? Yes, marketing, yes, creative, yes, communications, yes. But there was one thing which I always felt I kind of misread, or I would say I did not pay attention to, was my connection with people. Because the one thing which was common in all these stages, but I said that I shifted to too many countries, the one thing which was always stable or which always kind of kept me going was my adaptation towards cultures, my adaptation towards people, going out and finding people, going out and meeting people. My husband always says at every country, though I am the one who's working, but she is the one who has more social circle because she goes out, she meets people, she knocks on doors, she kind of wants to understand. So I think that was one thing which I was missing, that I do not use this strength of mine to kind of connect with people. I do connect with people. I do adapt myself to cultures. I kind of make friends at every place I go. People see me and they say, okay, yes, she has a, I remember at so many times people used to say me, you have a very balanced aura around you. You have a very positive aura around you. People love coming and talking to you. I was like, is that something which is a strength which I have kept hidden till now?
Yeah.
That's where I said, yes, maybe that was the answer in me, that strength of connecting to people, that strength of why would people want to come and talk to me? Or why would I say that, yes, I want to help with people with that? So I think the combination of connecting with people and the point which I used to see was my weakness of transitioning through many countries, I combined both of them and found a new me. I combined both of them where I found that my connection with people, plus my cultural transitions, plus my personal and professional transitions, if I can combine these two, which I had never thought of doing, this is something which I was not seeing before. It was not visible before to me. And now
Yeah.
it's in front of me, stark clear. And I think that happened, that shift happened. And I always say that inflection point which happened was because of the self reflection, was because of the asking questions to yourself. And that is where I kind of started, I would say intentionally every week sitting for 5 minutes and closing my eyes and asking myself, you know, am I going on the right path? Or am I using all my strengths, which should be happening? And what is the thing which I want to do? There are two things in life. One is you want to do something for a monetary benefit, and the other thing is you want to do something for the impact benefit. For me,
Yeah.
somewhere or the other, the impact benefit always outweighs the monetary benefit. And then the question comes is, am I doing anything to kind of impact the people around me? So I think every week when I close my eyes and ask these questions to myself, it gives me the answers. It gives
Yeah.
me, and I think every week, because I think now I have stopped thinking of 2 years or 3 years down the line because my life has been so ups and downs. I only think for a week because, and the very strange part about Nikhil is that you don't understand you have these good things about you until unless somebody outside tells you about them. I
Yeah.
always feel, oh my God, my story is not so big. See my other peers, see my other batchmates. They are directors, they are presidents, and what am I doing? I'm doing nothing. That dip in your confidence when it comes, it's you kind of tend to see LinkedIn much more because you want to see what the
Yeah.
other people are doing and what am I doing? I'm a failure. But then
Yeah. No.
strangely, you have people around you who kind of tell you that, lady, you are not doing anything. You are the bravest person. I got two, three messages from my acquaintances, and I'm just saying acquaintances, not even friends, who wrote to me that, Sugandha, we have seen your progression on Facebook and LinkedIn and all that. And now we are seeing that you're packing your bags for Hamburg. I was like, yeah, we are shifting. And she's like, we are just seeing as an outsider and seeing how brave you are and going at every place and finding friends and, getting settled and and then again moving to the next country. You don't
Yeah.
realize that, being on the inside, that you have done something great because
No.
people would say that, oh, your life is so good, traveling so many countries. And then I would say, yeah, it is good, but come to on the other part, it's difficult also. So
Yeah.
it's
And
both ways. It's like the grass is always greener on the other side, kind of a thing.
That's true, but also that's one of the reasons I always say, you can't write the label from inside the bottle. The thing is, we
Absolutely.
can't see what we can't see because of
Yeah.
proximity, right?
Yeah.
And, I've done 80 plus interviews now. And one of the consistent themes I found in solopreneurship is that 9 times out of 10, our superpowers are things we don't realize are superpowers. These are things we do so naturally that we just think that, oh, everybody does this. It's so easy for me that I can't imagine anyone's going to pay money for that or, hire me for that because
Yeah.
it comes so naturally. And yet, like you said, and that's why if you have to sort of pull yourself outside the bottle and let other people sort of say that, okay, Sugandha, this is an amazing skill you have, like
Yeah.
this ability to relate to people, to sort of cut across, cultures and boundaries and sort of build rapport and relationships.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important thing to be able to do. And especially as a solopreneur, right? You have to be able to have those people around you who can sort of guide you and help you find those signposts. And then reflection, I think, is really important that you just
Yes.
talked about.
Yes.
We don't give ourselves the time and space to actually,
Yeah.
and even less and less. You talked about the transition to digital. To me, digital is constant distraction for the brain. That's really the
Absolutely.
world we live in now, right? It's
Yeah.
like constant stimulation is very unhealthy for the brain.
True.
It reduces the creativity. It reduces all the things that we sort of have to, the muscles we have to build, if you like, in our brain, right?
Yeah.
So no,
That's true.
I completely agree. And I think that's a really important part of of solopreneurship. So
True.
I want to shift gears and talk about brand building a little bit for the
Mm-hmm.
next few minutes. So now you call yourself a transitional life coach, right? Now
Mm-hmm.
that feels true. But transition can mean so many different things, right? Career transition, cultural transition, identity,
Yeah.
motherhood, relocation, like you mentioned, reinvention or promotion. Now, we're both familiar with the marketing advice of niching down, right?
Absolutely.
So but do you ever feel like choosing a box risks flattening the very thing that makes your work powerful?
Nikhil, as you said, it's very difficult to cut down to a niche. But obviously,
Yeah,
being a marketer, the one thing which you always learned is that if you don't differentiate yourself, you'll be lost in the crowd. So I think
yeah,
the one thing which I kind of wanted always to see that, okay, I want to be a coach. Yes. And because as I said, I wanted to combine my strengths of connecting with people and going myself through transitions and, kind of understanding how the cultures adapt and everything. But my point being that, okay, how am I different? Yes, there are amazing coaches out there. There are amazing people out there. But how am I different? And then again comes to a point where you say that What is the strength which you have? And that's why the word of transition comes around. And when I say transitional, there is a very broad aspect to it. There's a brand which I want to build about myself, which is very broad. And when I say very broad, and as you said, transition can be anything. It can be personal, it can be professional, it can be even inner transitions within you. So I want to kind of address to all of them, but in a very distinctive manner. And when I say distinctive manner, there is something which I am actually working on. I cannot give you much details because there's not much detail. It's just a thought in my mind right now. And that is a thought which I even put on my LinkedIn heading, which says, finding your voice in the noise. That is a kind of thing which I want to build about. Now, when I say finding your voice in the noise, is something which I have myself experienced. I myself experienced because when you get lost with so many information around you, whether it was UI, UX design, when somebody asked me to do the course, or whether it was, what kind of coach do I want to become? What kind of direction do I want to take? There was a lot of noise around me. And I saw myself kind of getting drowned in that. And then came to a point like, how do I find my own voice in this so much of overwhelming noise? And for me, that was like you would say a marketing thing or a branding thing. I don't know, but I got stuck to it. I got stuck to it. And I have a very good, I would say a mentor, a trainer, or a coach, friend, a colleague, whoever. And I spoke to him about it. And he was like, this is amazing. He was like, I could not even think about it in any ways, but he being an experienced coach, he could think twice, my capacity. And he was like, this is amazing, Sugandha. We can do so much with it. And that is where I think today, if I say that as a solopreneur, as a coach, if I say that I want to be a transitional coach, I think my revolvement, or I would revolve around helping people finding their voice in the noise,
Yeah.
helping people finding what they stand for, helping people understand what their strengths are, helping people understand what they want to do in their life. Because all these questions I asked myself, and that is where to I am here today because of those questions. So,
Yeah.
and I would say, by the grace of God, I had some support at that time. I had some support of coaches around me whom I would speak to. But there might be so many people around here who don't have that support, who don't have that awareness, who don't even know something like this exists about self reflection. But I want to be out there. And as I said, for me, the impact overweighs the monetary benefit. So I said, even
Yeah.
if one person I can help through my thinking process, I'll be happy. Because this whole branding around me being a solopreneur is how I can help people find their voice in this noise. And that's what
Yeah.
I would say I stand for. So
Right.
yeah, that's where I would say my transitions, my experiences, I want to harvest all that and grow a new crop of finding a seed of finding your voice in the noise. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually love that, and I want to dig a little deeper in that. But
Mhm.
the one thing I want to touch on before that is that, I do believe that niching early is a bad thing, right? Because
Correct.
you're just starting out in your journey. And I think it's really important, to your point, to sort of put a lot, to spread, to start broad,
Mhm.
to really start to get a sense of the seeds you're planting, where they're sprouting,
True.
who's coming back, what patterns you're seeing. So
Yeah.
I think that's a much smarter strategy, at least in your first year or so,
Yeah.
than just niching, because you don't have enough information. The
Correct.
market hasn't given you enough signals yet to
Correct.
really understand what resonates, what gets you excited, like you
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
that, over the monetary value, your passion for actually helping people
Yeah.
has to also align with that, with what the market needs.
Absolutely.
A brilliant guest I had on the show, Angela, once said, and this line has always stayed with me, that you should do what makes your heart sing and your cash register go ka-ching. And she said those both those things have to be true, right? It's not
Absolutely.
one or the other. So I
Absolutely.
love that. So
Completely
now,
resonate with that.
Yeah, it's great, right? I love. It's always it's been all it's awesome. I told her I'm gonna well, I always give her credit, but I think it's a great line,
Yeah,
and I think it's a brilliant mantra for solopreneurs because
100%.
very often we end up doing one or the other, right? And
Correct.
that's a problem.
Yeah.
So I want to go back on your line now, the
Mhm,
LinkedIn headline. I think it's a beautiful line. Help find your voice in the noise.
mhm.
But as I've been listening to your story, the way you've navigated what I would call seismic shifts, how you described, from, I mean, India to Dubai to Australia to Hamburg, learning a completely foreign language,
Yeah,
and not, it's easier for kids to learn languages. We know that. So it's,
absolutely.
I understand how your son picked it up faster
Yeah.
and your husband already sort of had this thing. So I wonder if your real gift is actually something deeper. So do you think your work is really about helping people find their voice, or is it about helping them trust the version of themselves that challenging transitions reveal? I'm just wondering that as we talk.
Wow, wow, Nikhil. I mean, thank you for actually sharing that point because uh, I would say it's both ways because I think people are struggling on both the fronts. People are struggling to find out what they want, and on the other side, people are struggling to believe themselves about what they're doing. And I think it's both, it's, and the both things are very important. And the both things are, I would say, neglected by us as, people who are busy running their lives, busy, kind of walking to the paths of success and everything, scaling heights. But they sometimes, when they are facing these questions, both the questions come in their face and they are like stumped as to what do we do now, whether it's finding what they want to do next, or whether it's trusting what you are doing right now, or if it's right or if it's wrong. It's about the self trust, and that's where it gets a little tricky over there because, as I said, the noise is so much around you, you don't even know if you can trust yourself. So it's both the ways, and I believe that for me, uh, it has a deeper meaning because, as I said, if at that time, 20 years back, I would not have trusted myself to make the shift from a dentist to a marketing person, I would not have been here today. I would not have been here today. And I don't say I regret that decision, to be very honest. I kind of am proud of that decision. I'm kind of I'm kind of proud that I had the confidence or the strength at that time and trust in myself to make that decision. So I think both these things, for me, they hold a very deep meaning. They hold, I would say, the foundation of my journey till today, or I would say especially this shift which I made from marketing to being a coach is something which is based on finding myself and which is based on trusting myself. And today, when I see people out there, like, touch wood, I have been, I would say, the way you said, the kind of clients you attract, I have been attracting clients who are always either wanting to make a shift and who are not sure as to what to do, or they are doing something, but they are kind of at a position where they are, the trust is shaking, and they are like, okay, what do we do now? And
Yeah.
that is where I think my program, which I want to design, is based on that we are helping. And it's an umbrella program. It's an umbrella program which is both ways, finding what you want to do and trusting what you want to do. So it's both. And I believe that, and I want to target people who are like, kind of at a transition in a difficult path, and they don't know where to go. And for me, that is why it is not about one-to-one coaching which is important. For me,
Mhm.
I want to create awareness around this. For me, the doing workshops, doing awareness sessions for people, that is more important than doing one-to-one coaching. And that is where, for me, the impact benefit outweighs the monetary benefit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I agree. I think there are two sides to that coin, right? But I think it's really interesting to explore that deeper layer because I think one of the things we all struggle with, or at least there's a tendency to try and wipe away the difficult periods of your life, right? Yet to me, those have been, when I look back now in my 50s, they've been the most important ones in terms of shaping me, right?
100%.
So the hardships that I've faced, even, the rejection, has given me the kind of fortitude that now tells me, okay, I have the courage to get through this, right?
Yes.
That there is another side to this.
Yes.
But I feel like we try to shave away all those things that were not
No.
good, right? And
No.
yet, like you said, you realize some of your superpowers come from all of those experiences that were not the good ones, right? Because
Very,
we tend.
very strangely, Nikhil, I just remembered something that I remembered when I had finished my MBA, and as I said, the recession took place, and we were
Yeah.
amongst the last 50 students left to be placed on the campus, and. My mom called up and she says, okay, you're not getting a job. I know it's very difficult. Please pack up your bags and come home and we'll see what we can do over here. I said, okay. But then something inside of me just spoke up. I told my mom, I said, Mom, give me 15 days. Okay. If in this 15 days nothing comes up, I'll be back. And out of strength, confidence, or whatever you say, I packed all my stuff, couriered it back to my hometown, and I just kept clothes for 15 days. I said, if something works out, fine, otherwise I'll go. I don't know, that confidence was there, the trust was there. And then Biocon came into the campus and I got placed in that. But that belief in yourself, that trust, that yes, difficult times are there, struggles are there. But I think, as you said, these shape you. My struggles have been all across. My struggles have not just been across professional, they have been around personal, they have been around
Sure.
medical. I mean,
Mhm.
just to share that I had a very, very, very difficult motherhood, difficult pregnancy. So it was a combination of so much for me that today I feel that if I am a mature person, if I am a much more wiser person, and if I today, the first or the, if you say the most important benefit if I have today of these difficulties are the ability to reflect on myself. All
Yeah.
these transitions which has given me the ability where I can ask questions to myself, where many people who are in a comfortable environment, who are not going through these transitions, they don't ask them. So I think somewhere
Yeah.
or the other, these difficulties, they kind of probe you, they provoke you. Like, how as a we coach we always says evoke and provoke. So we as a coach, we always say that we are here to evoke you, to provoke you. Similarly, your own thoughts are there to evoke you, to provoke you, but you just have to give them time. The thoughts will come. They will
Yeah.
cause the shuffle in your mind. They will cause the disturbance, but are you ready to hear that disturbance? That depends upon
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, and I think it's really important also to accept those parts of
Yes,
yourself, right? Not
absolutely.
try and reject them. And like you said, you can't compartmentalize your professional and personal.
Yes,
What happens happens to the whole being, and
absolutely.
that person walks into every scenario.
Yes,
So you certainly you act a little differently when you're with friends versus when you're with your boss,
yes,
but you're still the same. The
yes,
same values, the same principles, the same, pieces that made that person always enter that room. So yeah, I
100%.
think that's really interesting. So the other thing I want to touch on is you mentioned this great pattern, right? That every time you come to a new country, you somehow end up building a bigger social and professional network than your husband,
Yes,
even though he's the one moving with the corporate
yes,
job and knows, is familiar with
yes,
the company, the group, the people.
right.
Now, for a solopreneur sitting behind a laptop who dreads networking,
Mm-hmm.
what are two or three specific things they can do to build those kinds of connections when they know absolutely nobody?
um I think a very important thing which I have learned, and I think which I kind of feel proud upon myself, is I don't be scared of knocking on doors. I don't feel scared of talking to people. I don't feel, not talking to people, I would say, I would rather say asking questions. I was wondering here and there for some information, and I used to email every other person coming on the way. And my mentor said to me, he said, Sugandha, you know what? You are one stubborn girl. You keep on knocking on the doors until you get the answers. I said, yes, because if I don't get the answers, I mean, for me, the questions are important and I need those answers. And so I believe that for a solopreneur, there will be many questions coming your way, which you don't know answers for. But there are people out there, and there are good people who themselves have gone through this journey of finding the answers. Go and ask. Go and
Yeah.
ask. Go and ask. Don't be scared to ask. Because if you don't ask, you will never know. So I think one thing very, very important which I've learned is just ask. It's very easy, believe me. It's very easy if you just have to kind of not overthink about it. If you just straight
Yes.
away say that, yes, I am in a need and there are people who specialize in these things, then why not go to that person? Yes, it needs confidence, but are you going to lose something? No. Is a person going to hate you? No. Is a person going to embarrass you? Might be. But will you lose something? No. If you are not so egoistic and arrogant to ask, go and ask.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think for solopreneurs, that's a critical business imperative, right?
Absolutely.
Is ask for help. And in some ways, I would say the corporate world, or maybe it's cultural, made that seem like a weakness, right?
Yes.
Asking for
Yeah.
help, and especially for men, but
It is very
and maybe
strange.
more so Indian men. Yeah, but that's maybe a whole other podcast. But
Yeah.
no, I completely agree. And the worst that'll happen is they'll say no, or I can't help you, or like you said, say,
Exactly.
why are you asking me? But you're not gonna, not changes nothing. It doesn't impact who you are, or
Absolutely.
and more often than not, I always see people are more than happy to give
100%.
you advice or answer a
Yeah.
question, right? Because you're basically sort of putting them on a little bit of a pedestal and saying, listen, I'm
Exactly.
asking for your wisdom or your gyan. So I
Absolutely. Yeah,
think,
we all love to we all love to give free gyan, believe me. And this is just like, some people love to do that. I'm one of those people. I would love to give you gyan when you come to me, because as I said, when you have those people who are specializes in that thing, why don't you go and ask? So it's
yeah.
very simple.
True. So now the other thing I want to touch on is this: you're studying cultural intelligence. You talked about that a little bit, how, there are differences in terms of how cultures communicate, how they form friendships, how they trust, how they buy. So a lot of solopreneurs today have clients across borders.
Yeah.
So what's one cultural blind spot solopreneurs often miss when they're trying to build trust with someone from a very different background? What advice would you give them?
I think it's very important, if you have clients across the world, it's very important for you to understand uh, the reason behind how the person is behaving, or how the person is the client is the client able to trust you or not trust you? If not trust you, maybe you are not doing anything wrong. Maybe it's the way they kind of take time to trust another person. So I think for you, it's very important to understand why they are doing what they are doing, why they are behaving in such a way, why they some people are very open in non-verbal cues. Some people are not very you're not very expressive in their terms. I like people who are expressive, but I have clients who will not express in the way of appreciation. I remember one of my clients, she hardly kind of gave me that vibe of that, yes, she's happy about the session and everything. But, but maybe I was overthinking. And at that time, I was too naive to think what's happening. But then I was shocked to see a mail from her in the evening saying, "Thank you, Sugandha. You really helped me out today with your coaching session." And I was like, okay, maybe I misread something, because she was not showing me any expressions. But I was like, I'm not going to be in that way who's going to say, "Oh my God, I did not have a good session because my client did not smile." She did not smile because that's the culture. Maybe she was happy and she just didn't need to how to express it. So I think it's
Yeah.
very important to understand as a solopreneur what from which culture your client or your colleague or whoever comes from, and what is the basis of their culture, what they're doing, why they're doing it. And and be open to it. As a coach, like we always say, as a coach, you need to be open, you need to be flexible. So I believe you need to be open and not have biases around it. So for me, I think that's one thing which is very important. I have been kind of following it pretty hard, because as I said, I me myself have gone, I've worked with Middle Eastern, I've worked with the Australians, I've worked with Germans. So I think for me, I know that how they work is not because they are as a person, like, oh sorry, they have a something like a vendetta against me or something like that.
Right.
No, they are like they are born like they are. So I mean, that's what their culture is.
Yeah, no, I think that's good advice. And you're right. The cultural mores are different, right? We shouldn't make assumptions and sort of
Absolutely.
place on people what we expect the way we are, them to be the way we are. So
100.
you're right. Yeah, no, I
Absolutely.
agree. And doing a little bit of research never goes
Yeah.
you never go astray, right? It's always good to understand, even a new product you're launching. It's always good to understand the market you're going into, right?
Yes.
It's going to be
Yes.
different. So I think it's a very similar sort of uh, uh, way to approach it. So
Absolutely.
last question before we get into the rapid fire
Mhm.
round. If you had to give advice, one piece of advice to someone who wants to start their solopreneur journey, what would you tell them?
Um, I would say that first of all, believe in yourself. First of all, trust that if you are doing something and if you're made up your mind to do something after a lot of research or whatever you have done, because if you are not convinced by yourself, you cannot convince your client, you cannot convince your customer. So be convinced about what you are doing or what you are selling, be it a product or a service or whatever you're you're building a business. Be convinced about that first, and then only you can convince anybody out there. And secondly, I think I would repeat the same thing, that don't scare in asking questions. Ask for help. Knock on doors, ask for help. Don't shy away. You're not going to lose anything. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd add one more: call Sugandha when you make that transition, right?
Oh, thank you so much, Nikhil. Always ready for that.
All right, so we got our rapid fire round. We're looking for one word or one sentence answers.
Okay.
Now, you practiced dentistry for a year.
Hmm.
What's scarier, performing a root canal or launching your own solo coaching business?
Launching your own coaching business.
One cultural habit you picked up abroad and that you'll never give up.
Being punctual.
Being punctual. That's, yeah. My father was strange for India. They used to always joke. My parents would be invited 8 p.m. for dinner. They'd show up at 8 p.m. and the guests hadn't even showered yet because nobody was expected before 9. It's
Yeah,
funny.
that's something which I think I am in the process of learning, and I think I'll pick that up for my whole life now.
If you could copy paste one element of Australian lifestyle culture and drop it directly into Germany, what would it be?
Being outdoors. Being
Love it.
outdoors, having fun outdoors, just 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 enjoying nature.
Complete the sentence. Reinvention is.
Important. It's quite important. It's quite
Yes,
important,
great.
and it's where it's a path to grow.
If your coaching brand was a song or musical genre, what would it be?
Whoa, that's a difficult one. I would say it's. I just remember of a Hindi ghazal which says, "तुम इतना क्यों मुस्कुरा रहे हो? क्या गम है जिसको छुपा रहे हो?" It's like you're smiling too much, but there's something in behind that which you might are not sharing and which you should share, because we are always
Great.
there as
Love.
coaches.
Yeah, true. And like you said, evoke and provoke, right? There's always
Absolutely.
something behind. So I
Absolutely.
love that. And that's a great way to end the show. So, Ganda, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much
Thank you
for
so
being so
much.
open and honest about your journey.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. It was an amazing time spent with you in this conversation, and I just believe you have this amazing platform which you kind of invite people onto to share their stories. And sometimes telling these stories ourselves, we become like, so full of energy, and we say, "Oh wow, we did an amazing job today. You're so full of energy after this session." So thank you again so much for this.
Thank you. I feel like I'm the lucky one getting to listen to and share all these stories. So
Thank you. The feeling is mutual.
there are a few things about my conversation with Sugandha that I think are especially useful for anyone building a coaching or solo business. The first lesson: your superpower is usually the exact thing you think everyone else can do. We all completely misread our value. Sugandha spent years packing up her life, moving from India to Dubai to Australia and finally to Germany. In every single country, she managed to connect with people across cultures and build a massive, thriving network entirely from scratch. Yet, when she sat down to evaluate her business strengths, she completely overlooked that skill. She thought it was just something she did and assumed everyone else did it too. That right there is where so many solopreneurs miss the gold in their own stories. Having done over 80 of these interviews now, I see this constantly. 9 times out of 10, your superpower is something you do so effortlessly that your brain completely discounts it. You never think to charge for it. But the market doesn't just buy a polished resume, it buys the pattern you can help someone else recognize and move through. The second lesson is this: don't force a niche before the market has actually spoken. Sugandha calls herself a transitional life coach, and we debated whether that's too broad. But here's my honest take: In your first year of business, staying broad is actually the smartest move you can make. Everyone will tell you, niche down, and eventually they're right. But niching too early isn't smart marketing, it's just guesswork. You don't have enough information yet. You don't know which clients energize you, which problems you solve best, or which people are actually willing to pay you for your expertise. So if you're early in your journey, plant your seeds wisely and pay close attention to what actually sprouts. Look for patterns, track who comes back, what they ask for, what makes your heart sing and your cash register go ka-ching, as my guest Angela once put it. Both have to be true. And here's the thing, a niche you discover this way is already validated. People have paid you, referred you, come back for more. A niche you invent on a whiteboard is just a hypothesis you now have to go out and prove. So save yourself the agony and let the market hand you the answer. And the third lesson is one that a lot of solopreneurs struggle to internalize. Asking for help is a business skill, not a weakness. Sugandha's mentor called her stubborn because she kept knocking on doors until she got the answers she was looking for. She emailed people, she'd ask questions, and her logic is airtight. What do you actually lose by asking? Nothing. The worst case is you'll get a no, and you'll be exactly where you started. For solopreneurs, this is non negotiable. You don't have a team down the hall or up on the third floor. The corporate world conditioned a lot of us to think that asking for help was some sign of lack of competence. But when you're running a solo business, that mindset is costly. Every question you sit on, how to price, how to clarify your positioning, whether that new offer will sell, is a delayed decision. And delayed decisions are delayed revenue. Someone out there has already spent time and money solving exactly the same problem you're wrestling with. The solopreneurs who build revenue the fastest are the ones who borrow other people's answers instead of wasting 6 months reinventing every wheel on their own. So here's my challenge to you this week. Put this skill to the test. Go out there and ask 3 people who know your work what they honestly see as your unique edge. I promise you, their answers will surprise you. Because as I always say, you can't write the label from inside the bottle. Thanks for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If this episode made you realize your brand still feels scattered or you're tired of struggling to package your experience so clients actually get it, let's fix that. I'm offering a limited number of free 45-minute brand clarity sessions. And this is not a hidden sales pitch. We look at your messaging live, spot where the friction is, and define the next move that will make your brand easier to understand. You can book your spot right now at clarity.boostsolo.com or through the link in the show notes. Until next time, keep breaking free from the corporate grind. And remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.